Okay, so where we left off, I was adding individual spaces between each letter form. And I'm just doing it as 10 points, which is very small. But what it allows me to do is I think that the I and the L are too close together. I can take that 10 points and expand it. And in that way, I can affect the spacing and the kerning of each letter, between each letter. And you just want it to be as perfect as you can make it, just to feel right. And this is the first step to kind of customizing your font treatment or your text treatment. The L's are a little close together. The way my typography teacher described it, it's like each letter is bathed in a cube of water. And you want that negative space of the water that fills in around them to be equal around all letters. So you see that the D, it doesn't allow for much space at all, right? So you give it a little bit more space on the sides. And capitals do a much better job spacing themselves than lowercase letters. But you can still perfect it, make it a little bit stronger to help readability, to help visual impact. Okay. Other things you might try are just slight size differences. So maybe I want the D to be just a little bit smaller for whatever reason. So you can think of those things. Okay, once you have it, if you use your large selection tool, you can also distort it in other ways, right? I can make it kind of taller and more stretched out like that, just by stretching it with the large selection tool. I can also place it a little differently, just using the arrows and nudging it up or down. But then I might decide it's still text, right? So I go back to my text tools, and I want to give a little bit more space now between the A and the L. Customize that. So it's all about flexibility, readability, and I'm fully utilizing all of the advantages of having the text tool. Then I'm going to use a large, and I'm just going to shrink it a little bit, holding down Shift to lock its proportions. Nudge it up a little bit. Hold down Shift and Option to grow from the center, and then just stretch it out horizontally a little bit. Or just hold down Option so it only goes horizontal. And that way I can really accentuate my curve and still not interfere with my illustration. Okay, so if that's kind of the best image I have so far, I'm going to save it. But before that, I'm going to select that font, and I'm going to make a copy. So Command-C, or Edit Copy. And then I'm going to make a new layer. I'll lock the old one, make a new layer, and I'll call this Text 2. And then in this Text 2 layer, I'm going to paste in place. And then I'm going to turn off the old one, right? So I've made an exact copy of my Godzilla text here. And it's still in the text form. So I can select it, and now I can try a different text spaced out with these sizes. So let's see. I did Rock's Death. What are some of the others I liked? They're in downloads. Bad Grunge. Let's try that one. I have to select it all and then find it. There we go. So Bad Grunge is a lot smaller, even at those point sizes, but there are still individual spaces between that I can work with. So what do? I use the large selection tool. I can grow it. I can make it fit. And I kind of like this one too. Trying to make it match that curve in a way that I think is really effective. Good. Now I'm going to duplicate that. I'm going to copy it, lock that layer, turn it off, make a new text layer. Text 3. And on this new text layer, I paste in place, use the type tool, and change it to something with soul in it. Soul mission. Oh, that one's a lot bigger. This one's a lot sloppier too. Let's see. So instead of having to shrink it all smaller, I'm going to instead steal it from this other version, my earlier text treatment. I'm going to copy that, lock it, and now paste that in place. And now replace that with Soul Mission. There it is. Still too big. So, I'm gonna go in, make it all smaller font. So that I can now go in and size it up to what I want. So I think it's probably gonna be about 120. But then the spaces maybe about 10. So this is really about using the text tools in Illustrator to be as helpful as possible. Before we start customizing them as our own fonts. And it can really kind of sharpen our taste in terms of what we're looking for and how our sketch can be interpreted. Now, if you find that you just love playing with text, then graphic design is a perfect area of digital art for you to explore. It's never been my favorite preoccupation, but I understand the beauty of it because you're always working with solutions of familiar forms. Things like the font size, the kerning between, the leading between lines of type. So now that I have it spaced in a way that's pretty readable, I can use the large selection tool here and I can space it out the way I want. Now, I like to do everything in black first, just simple and strong. Just like a logo, good readable type should be visible and very readable just in black and white first. It's also important to remember your alignment. And make sure that it reads clearly. And I want this to kind of start and stop visually about the same place. Okay, so now I have some options to make, or decisions to make. Which text treatment do I like? Do I like the first? Very bold. Do I like the second? Do I like the third? And this is just my starting place. Well, these two are so similar between that and this. This one's just more condensed in its kerning. And I don't like how the D is kind of hard to read. So I think that one's out. So now it's between this one and this one. And to me, this one looks more like a surf shop, whereas this one looks kind of bold and scary. So I'm inclined to go with that. It kind of matches the idea of my sketch a little bit better. Big, bold, strong type flag. I want to make sure it starts and stops at the right place. So let me see. Yep, that works pretty well. Now the thing I don't love about it, I've sized it, I've spaced it, I've customized it. It's all of a clean vector, but I don't love how the G is so close there. I'd like to see maybe some more debris there. So now we get into customizing the font shapes. So before I do that, I'm going to save it where it is. It's a working file, my text design file. I should probably put my name in there. It's an AI file I'm saving to the desktop. Okay, now I'm going to duplicate that text again, copy it, make a new layer, and this will be called custom text. Now remember, it doesn't take a lot of memory in Illustrator to save multiple layers because they're all just vectors. So I tend to work with lots of layers and lots of options, especially because things can kind of get messed up very easily. So I'm calling this custom text and I'm pasting in my text because now this is what I'm going to do with it. I'm going to right click on it with the large selection tool and say create outlines. And what this does is it takes it out of the text tool features. So I can no longer play with spacing between letters. I can no longer correct misspellings or do those sort of things with the letters. Instead, they're vector shapes, just like if I drew them myself, because all fonts are vectors at their core. But what's so great about using vector shapes is now I know how to modify my vector shapes and turn them into what I want. So if I want a little bit more space on this edge, I can simply select that path and redraw the inside of that letter. Easy, right? Now I want to kind of match the jaggedy feeling of this blocky text. Just open up that G a little bit.